I watched the G1 Climax for the first time, and I am going to give you my thoughts on all different aspects of it. I'm going to start off with just going right through the A block and the B block and giving my brief thoughts on each professional wrestler. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with Block A. And the first person we are going to start with is Boltin Oleg, and he is the guy. He is the person who shined the most in this tournament. At the end of this tournament, my biggest takeaway was that Boltin Oleg is the guy. The first time I saw him was his first match in this tournament, and it was with Roye Oiwa. I hope I'm pronouncing that right because I'm going to have to say his name a bunch in the rest of this video. But his first match was with him, and I immediately loved the guy. I was like, this is the guy I am going to get behind in this tournament. And that was a good decision because he was fantastic throughout the entire tournament. Did not have a bad match, in my opinion. And I just think he's fantastic. I think he is probably in one of my most must watch wrestlers in pro wrestling today after this tournament. And I'm interested in anything he does going forward. In my opinion, every single one of his matches delivered. The one with Takeshita was fantastic. The one with Yuto-Tsuji was amazing. And probably pretty much every single one of them I enjoyed. Definitely need to watch more of him. And it really made me think that I wish a lot of guys in AEW and WWE would take the chance to go somewhere else. So instead of every WWE guy who gets cut or gets released or doesn't renew their contract going to AEW, I wish some of them would take a chance and go to New Japan. And then the same thing with AEW. I do know they have a working relationship with New Japan, and they do Forbidden Door every single year. But I wish more guys in North America would take a chance and try and go to New Japan, because I think a guy like Ilya Dragunov would be fantastic in New Japan. I would love to see him wrestle Boltin Oleg. But that's just the thought I had, a little sidebar there. But Boltin Oleg, he is the guy. I absolutely fell in love with him in this tournament, and I need to see more of him. Next up is Roye Oiwa. Again, hope I'm pronouncing that right. And he was the guy who had Boltin Oleg's first match. And I'm not sure if it was the first match of the entire tournament. It was definitely on night one when they were in Chicago. Don't remember if it was the very first match, but I think it might have been, because when I saw both of them, I was like, if this tournament's going to be filled with guys like Boltin Oleg and Oiwa, then I'm going to absolutely love this tournament. Oiwa was a guy who he has a lot of size. He's a big guy, and he can really wrestle. And he obviously won the tournament, which I'll get into later on. But he's only 27 years old. I completely expect him to be the future of New Japan for a very long time, and I became a fan of his as well. So Oiwa was another guy I really liked from the very beginning. Next up, we have Konosuke Takeshita, and this is the guy who, in the tournament, I was most familiar with. I've probably seen more Takeshita matches than every single person in this tournament combined. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on him, but I do really enjoy Takeshita. He's the future as well. He delivered in every single one of his matches in this tournament, and I know for sure I'm going to be seeing a lot of Takeshita going forward. Now we have Yuto-Tsuji, who is the current IWGP champion, which I'll get into something with the IWGP Championship later on, but just going to talk about Yuto-Tsuji a little bit here. I think he's a great worker. A lot of his matches were of the matches I enjoyed most in this tournament. Whenever I saw that a Yuto-Tsuji match was up next, I was like, okay, this is something I can get excited for. He probably had the longest ring time of anyone throughout the tournament. I don't know if that's a fact or if that's true, but it felt like it. All of his matches went pretty long, and they were all very entertaining. He also has entrance music that is quite catchy, and I'll talk about entrance music more a little later as well. But Yuto-Tsuji, I became a fan of him as well. Then we have Sonata, and this was a name I was familiar with going into the tournament. Don't know how much I actually saw him wrestle, but he was a name that I recognized. He came out with his like extravagant gold jacket and a hat that was like this big. So he definitely stood out in that aspect because a lot of the guys just are like professional wrestler, real serious type. So him being someone who kind of had that flamboyant gear, it kind of made him stand out a little bit. I don't recall if any of his matches particularly like were great and stood out to me. I might be forgetting one, but he definitely didn't have any bad matches, I don't believe, and he was enjoyable through the tournament as well. Now we have Hiroki Goto, and this was another name I knew of, but I knew that I know, like I knew the name, but I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I don't know if I ever saw a single match of his, but he was a guy who was the veteran of the tournament. They kind of used that as like the storyline. Can he become the oldest man to win the G1 Climax? So it was a little story for him going in, and it also kind of gave him an out in case he lost. It'd be like, oh, well, he's 47 years old, so we can't expect him to dominate these young guys. So it had a little story for him in the tournament. And again, like I said, he's 47 years old, and he had some quite physical matches and real solid matches for being 47 years old. Again, not familiar with him really. I know he's very decorated in New Japan, and maybe I need to check out some of his older matches of when he was a bit younger. But for being 47 years old, he put on some real solid matches as well. Now we have Yuto-Ice, and gotta be honest, I don't like him. He's not bad in the ring, but just something about him I don't like. Not sure what it is. Don't know if it's the gimmick. Because again, he's not bad in the ring. But throughout the entire tournament, I was just like, I don't like this guy for whatever reason. He had a match with Yota Tsuji where Tsuji just chopped him so much. On a later broadcast, they said that it was 280 times, I believe, which is insane. To have like 280 total strikes in a match is crazy, but to have 280 chops to one person is just insane. And you saw it. You saw it on his chest. His chest was bruised immediately, and for like the next two, three, four matches he had, you could see the swelling all over his chest. And he even got Walker Stewart to say, probably for the first time on a professional wrestling broadcast, he said Yota Tsuji, or not Yota Tsuji, he said Yuto-Ice has a swollen swollen areola. So I thought that popped me. That was pretty funny on the broadcast. Didn't expect an areola to be mentioned on the broadcast, but it was certainly bruised. He was in rough shape on his chest for quite a few matches. But yeah, Yuto-Ice, he was one of the guys who I was like, okay, I think I've seen enough Yuto-Ice for me. Then we have Shingo Takagi, and this was another name I was familiar with, and I think I like him. He had some real solid matches. He's one of the other older guys in the tournament, but he has like size, so he still looks like he can like do damage to people. And I think I like him. A lot of his matches were pretty enjoyable. He did have that one match on Forbidden Door. I think he was in that tag match with like Mystico and the Young Bucks and stuff. I think he was in that multi-man tag match. He was in some match in AEW Forbidden Door where he kind of stood out to me in there as well. But Shingo Takagi, he's a guy who I was like, okay, this guy's pretty good. Now we have to close out the A block. We have Jake Lee and Great-O-Khan, and these were probably two of the guys I was least interested in, probably even more so than Yuto-Ice. They were two of the more like goofier guys of the tournament, which I guess when you have a tournament of a bunch of guys who are like real serious professional wrestlers, you kind of need to have something a little different. So they kind of stand out. So they kind of had like their place in the tournament. But I wasn't big on anything either of them did. Not sure really how I feel about Great-O-Khan. Not sure if I hate him or if I like him. I'll kind of get into more on Great-O-Khan a little bit later. But Jake Lee, there was really nothing for me for Jake Lee. He's probably overall like the least interested person for me in the entire tournament. Don't really like him, don't really dislike him. Whereas Yuto-Ice, I was like, okay, I just don't like this guy for whatever reason. But at least it kind of invoked that of like not liking him. Jake Lee was kind of just there. And Great-O-Khan, again, I'll get into him a little bit more later. But that's the A block. Let's jump to the B block. And first up, we have Callum Newman. And this was a name I knew just because he recently, just either earlier this year or late last year, he became the youngest IWGP champion in history. So it was a name I saw when I saw it popped up that like the youngest champion had just been crowned. I looked him up to see like how he looked and if he looked like the future. But to me, I don't want to disrespect him, but it's kind of just like a Timu Osprey type of thing for me right now. He is only 23 and he can do all the stuff in the ring and he certainly has potential. But for me, he didn't do much for me in this tournament. He was like high profile in the tournament, made it to the semis, but it just wasn't. Cal Newman wasn't doing much for me in this tournament. But again, he's only 23 years old, so he's still super young and he has a lot of potential. But as of right now, it didn't really interest me much. Now we have, and I hope I pronounced this one right, Yuya Uemura. Yuya Uemura. I think that's how you pronounce it. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong because I'm going to have to say his name a bunch again because he was the other guy who made the finals and he has great size. He had a bunch of solid matches throughout the tournament. But for me, as a first time viewer and obviously someone who is not from Japan, he didn't really connect with me much. Um, he did a bit in the finals, but throughout the tournament, when I didn't know who was going to be in the finals, I really wasn't connected to him much. But he is certainly solid in the ring, and I definitely see him as someone who is going to be a big star for them in Japan. Now we have Gabe Kidd. And this was a name I knew because of AEW, and he looks great. He's in tremendous shape. I do know that right before the G1 Climax started, he posted on his social media a like 12-week transformation pic of him like taking his diet or nutrition or whatever exercise routine he was doing real serious, and you could tell that he got in the best shape of his career. But I the gimmick, whatever the gimmick is, I absolutely hate. He seems like his gimmick is a 12-year-old who thinks cursing is the coolest thing in the world because that's all he would do. He would curse like 25, 30 times per match. He would curse more than he would land offensive maneuvers. I guess that's him trying to get heel heat with the Japanese crowd. But for me, it was just, I was like, what is this? He was acting like a 12-year-old. I wasn't a fan of it. Anytime I saw that like he was next up and like his match was next, I was like, oh God, we got to do this again. We're gonna hear him curse a bunch. But he is solid in the ring. I don't want to take that away from him. But whatever the gimmick is currently, it just it doesn't do like it doesn't evoke like me wanting to dislike him for being like a bad guy, for being a heel. It just makes me dislike him because he's just acting like a 12-year-old in my opinion. But he looks great. He's solid in the ring and I think he has a lot of potential. I'm just not a fan of what I would call the 12-year-old gimmick. Then we have Ren Narita, and when I first saw this guy, I was like, this guy's going to be super boring. I was like, okay, this is one of the guys who we're going to be able to skip throughout the tournament. So anytime he had a match that was okay or good, I was pleasantly surprised. And he had a couple of them. He had a couple good matches in my opinion. His gear reminds me of something. I don't know what it is, but the entire tournament I was trying to figure it out, couldn't put a finger on it. I don't know if it's another wrestler. I don't know if it's something from like a movie or a video game or whatever it was, but his gear just kept reminding me of something, but couldn't figure out what it was. But he pleasantly surprised me in a couple matches just because he looked real bland and boring to me. But that's Ren Narita. Then we got Drilla Maloney. And this guy has tremendous hair. His hair is going nowhere for the rest of his life. He has a full head of hair that is going to be there until he is 90. He's in outstanding shape. And I think his finisher is absolutely fantastic. I love his finisher. He landed it great a bunch of times in this tournament. And he's a guy I wanna see more of. Drilla Maloney kind of stood out, but he was also he didn't stand out as much as like the top tier guys for me. But he was a guy who was like, okay, I can watch this guy going forward. Again, that finisher is fantastic. Then we have Zack Sabre Jr. And then other than Takeshita, this is the guy who I've seen wrestle the most out of anyone in this tournament. And Zack Sabre Jr. just did Zack Sabre Jr. stuff in this tournament. It's good to have a big veteran name that is recognizable to like a casual viewer of New Japan. He's not a Japanese wrestler, obviously, so kind of bringing in that non-Japanese name value to the tournament is something that could be helpful because again, it was one of the most recognizable names for me. So you got that as Zack Sabre Jr. Then we have Hanare, and he just looks like a professional wrestler just because he kind of needs to be a professional wrestler. You're not going to be working a normal job when you have your face tattooed here and it goes up through around his neck. So he certainly has a unique look. And I swear I saw him either, I feel like it was at a weigh-in for Kai Kara France, but it might have just been a training picture that he posted or something like that. I couldn't find it. I tried finding it, couldn't find it. But if you go on his Wikipedia, it does say he trains at City Kickboxing, which is where Kai Kara France trains, where Izzy used to train, and a bunch of those guys. So he certainly has some connection with Kai Kara France. But I swore I saw him before this tournament in a either weigh-in or training picture with Kai Kara France, because that face tattoo is certainly unique to him. But yeah, Hanare looks like a professional wrestler, and he did his stuff in this tournament. Now we have Oscar, and I think he has a lot of potential. He is real tall. I think he's listed, or they build him at 6'7", and he looks it. I thought he was honestly younger than he is. He looked like 23, 24 to me, but he's 28. He still has a lot of room to fill out and gain a lot of muscle, but he's a guy who I think has a lot of potential just because of his size. So he's a guy I kind of want to keep an eye on going forward, because I think he can be something special for them. Not really sure how I feel about just Oscar being the ring name, but I think he has some potential. Then we got Aaron Wolf, and he's another guy who I really liked. He's big, he's athletic, he's legit. He's an Olympic gold medalist in judo. And he's just this big guy who's a hoss, and he's like athletic for his size. So he's a guy who stood out to me, who I want to see more going forward. And again, if you have like that judo background, he's going to be able to do stuff that like he's flawless in. So he's going to be special in the ring, in my opinion. I think he's 30. I don't think he's been wrestling that long though. But his size, his athleticism, it made me want to see him more going forward. Then we got the last guy, and that is Shota Umino. And this is another name I knew because of AEW. I barely seen him wrestle. I've seen maybe 3 matches of him ever, and I only saw one in this tournament because he got a concussion on the first night. So they took him out of the tournament, and I honestly like that. I like the fact that they did not replace him. They just withdrew him from the tournament, and anyone who had to face him or who he was like scheduled to face next, they just didn't have a match. I like that they didn't find a replacement. It makes it feel more like a tournament to me rather than kind of finding a replacement to get a match on a card. So I like the fact that they did that. Hopefully he's good. Hopefully I don't know if he's back in the ring already. Not sure. But hopefully he's good, and I look forward to actually getting to see him wrestle more, because I hear good things about him, but again, I've seen maybe 3 matches max from him. So that's the A block and the B block. Just my brief thoughts on the wrestlers. Next up, let's talk about the commentary. And I will say Walker Stewart is outstanding. During AEW Forbidden Door, I heard a new voice that I wasn't familiar with. And I thought he was great. So I looked up to see who it was, and it turned out it was Walker Stewart. So I recognized the name, and obviously because it was Forbidden Door, he was New Japan's commentator, and he did not disappoint this entire tournament. I thought he was outstanding. I think he's probably my favorite play-by-play commentator in all of pro wrestling. And if I were to like create my perfect commentary team in pro wrestling today, I would pick Walker Stewart as play-by-play and Nigel McGuinness as the color commentator. I think Walker and Nigel would be a fantastic combination. But yeah, Walker Stewart was tremendous. They did a thing on commentary on the English broadcast, because that's what I watched for the majority of it. They did a thing on the English commentary where they would have English-speaking wrestlers in the tournament on broadcast. And I thought that was a cool little feature that they added. It kind of added to the tournament so the guy can kind of give his thoughts on the tournament so far, what's going forward, give his thoughts on the wrestlers in the tournament, and then if he was like facing someone coming up soon, he can kind of build a story to that. So I thought it was a cool feature that they included some of the wrestlers in the tournament on commentary. There was a moment real early on in the tournament. It was the first night that someone other than Walker Stewart and Chris Charlton, who was also on commentary throughout, well, not throughout, but he was on commentary quite a few times, who I thought was pretty good as well. Read one of his books on New Japan, so it was cool to hear him. But on days where Walker Stewart wasn't alone and Chris Charlton wasn't there, they would have the wrestlers. And early on in the tournament, Oscar was on. And Oscar said something like, when I went on excursion, I learned more of how to create my character something along those lines. And Walker Stewart cut him off, and he was like, I think that's a conversation for a different broadcast or something like that. And I really appreciated that from Walker, because I don't want to hear stuff like that on commentary. I don't want to hear about how you created your character and stuff like that. So I really appreciated that Walker kind of cut him off and like let him know that, like, hey, let's leave that behind the scenes. We don't really need to be broadcasting that to people on our broadcast during the tournament. So really enjoyed that. But yeah, Walker Stewart is tremendous, and he was one of the highlights of the tournament for me, which is saying a lot, because commentary in pro wrestling today in WWE and AEW is not great. So I think Walker Stewart's tremendous, and I want to hear more of him. Now let's talk about the presentation. A few things on this. I will say they have some great entrance songs, and I don't know if it's just because WWE's entrance songs are just so bad, but a lot of the entrance songs stood out to me, and it like got me excited. They were enjoyable. It wasn't the bland WWE style. So that stood out to me. They also had like graphics in the background that was cool as well. And the crowd. The crowd was amazing. This was one of the highlights of the tournament for me as well. They would react to what was going on in the ring instead of trying to get themselves over like they do with WWE crowds and AEW crowds. Instead of just trying to get a chant going, they would react to what was going on in the ring, and I really appreciated that. It made the tournament feel much better, and I enjoyed that. And then, yeah, just in general of the presentation, it obviously had more of a sporting feel than like AEW and WWE, which is to be expected from New Japan, but I like that. Then let's move to something I don't know how I feel about. I have a lot of questions, I have a lot of thoughts on, and that's having the IWGP Champion in the tournament. I'm not sure if that's a regular occurrence. I don't think it is. I don't think it's common that the IWGP Champion is in it. I could be wrong on that. Again, this is the first G1 Climax I watched in its entirety, so don't really know if that's common, but I don't think I'm a fan of it. You have to give him losses, and that's cool because it helps build guys up, but I don't know how good it is to have your champion constantly losing. And Yuto-Ice didn't lose a bunch, but if you put your champion in the tournament, he's gonna have to lose eventually. And they do a thing where if you do defeat the champion, you get a title shot at the champion at a future time. And that's where I kind of have questions. So, Yuto-Ice lost in probably like his second match, I believe. I don't remember who it was against. Let's just say for the sake of it, I don't think it was Sonata, but let's just say for the sake of it, it was Sonata. So say Sonata beats Yuto-Ice. He's earned himself a championship match. So in kayfabe, why would he not just get disqualified in the next match of the tournament? He's already secured a shot at the IWGP Championship, so why not get disqualified in the next one, get eliminated, not have to go through this grueling tournament, and then at the end of the tournament, while Yuto-Ice's going through it and he has to take all these matches, they're real physical, he's worn down, why not right after the tournament you'd be like, okay, now I want to get my IWGP Championship. Again, I don't know if there's like guidelines on when you get to call for the title shot or whatever. Don't know if that's the case, but that's something that I thought of during the tournament, that why would you, if you earned a title shot, why would you keep going through the tournament when you can just face him anyway? So I wasn't sure on that. And then what's in it for the champion? So Yuto-Ice is champion entering the tournament. If you main event the Tokyo Dome, you're going to be wrestling for the IWGP Championship. So he obviously doesn't plan on losing the title before then. Obviously that can happen. But going into it, it doesn't really make much sense for a champion to enter it. Obviously you win the G1 Climax and you can add that to your accolades. But as far as like kayfabe goes, if he's already champion, there's not much to gain from it. All you're going to do is have to take on a bunch of matches. You're going to get possible challengers if you lose, and you don't really gain much from it. Again, you do solidify a main event Tokyo Dome spot. So if you lose the title in the interim, you just get your title shot back. but Yota isn't planning on losing the title, so why would he really enter the tournament? I don't know. Those are just some questions I had, and again, I'm not sure of like when you can call for your title shot or whatever, so maybe they do have guidelines that I'm not familiar with. But that was just something I was curious about and something that I was like, hmm. Next up, let's move to something that I think is probably what bothered me the most throughout the tournament, and that was kind of disqualifications. So Great-O-Khan, he was the biggest, what do you want to say? He was the biggest guy who could have been disqualified. Anytime anyone entered the ring who was going to wrestle him, he would attack them during their entrance, and none of them knew it was coming. You would think after it's happened so many times, they would be prepared for it, but they weren't, and Great-O-Khan would attack them beforehand. He took, I believe it was Goto, he took Goto to the urinals and the bathroom and all this stuff. And he was just constantly using steel chairs, doing stuff that should have gotten him disqualified. And I don't know how I feel about this because on commentary, they were saying that you can use chair shots on the outside of the ring, but when it comes into the ring, then you can get disqualified. That just doesn't make sense to me. Why are we going to, especially in the tournament, where if you get disqualified, you get eliminated from the tournament, which I think is great. I think having these tournament rules is cool. But when you kind of turn a blind eye to this, which is what it is to me, it kind of lessens it for me. Great-O-Khan would get disqualified eventually when he would use the... Actually, I think it was disqualified in the Jake Lee match where he didn't even use the chair. Jake Lee kind of did the Eddie Guerrero spot. But there was plenty of times where Great-O-Khan probably should have been disqualified, and he wasn't. So it just doesn't really make much sense to me to like allow steel chair shots on the outside of the ring, but then if you do it in the ring, you get disqualified. I think that took away from the tournament, and I kind of wanted to see like less of that. There was spots where there was like interference and chair shots when either the ref got like bumped down or he was being distracted, which I'm fine with that. But there's plenty of times where steel chair shots were used and the ref saw it and just did nothing about it. So not a fan of that. There was a lot of guardrail spots, and that's kind of using the environment, so I get not getting disqualified for that. And it looked great with like the blue guardrail instead of the like WWE barricade where it's overdone and it doesn't look good. This looked good. It looked like it hurt. It made loud sounds. It pushed everything back. There was one point where, forget who it was, someone threw someone into the guardrail and completely knocked one of the like timekeepers over. I think it flipped the table and the timekeeper fell back in his chair, and I thought that was great. And then they would do some spots where they would have like the fans cleared out of the chairs, and they would do like a dive spot onto the chair, and that looked really good. I think they might have overdid that. They did that quite a bunch. But yeah, just the whole disqualification thing with like not using it in the ring, outside the ring, that kind of annoyed me, and I kind of think that kind of took away from the tournament. I wish they didn't do that. Now, one other thing that I think I'm going to say I'm not a fan of, and I understand why they do it, but on the cards where, so they were only having like 4 or 5 tournament matches on the cards, the other matches would be filled out with guys in the tournament in tag matches. And I understand you have to fill out the cards. People don't want to come and there only be 4 or 5 matches, which would have been the tournament matches. So I understand you have to make a longer card for people, but I think it kind of takes away from the tournament when you're putting them in tag matches on the card. I think if you only have the wrestlers in the tournament wrestle tournament matches, it kind of ups the, this is a grueling tournament, these are the only matches they can handle type of thing. I do understand, and I didn't watch any of the tag matches, so I could have been missing something here, because they could have been building to stuff within like storyline wise for the tournament in the tag matches, but I didn't watch any of them. So if they did that, that's a great use of them. But me personally, I think if you only have the tournament wrestlers wrestle tournament matches, I think that kind of adds to like, this tournament is exhausting, it's physical, it's grueling, and these wrestlers need their 1 or 2 day rest instead of wrestling the tag matches. But again, I understand you have to fill out cards, but that's something I would like to, I don't know if this is every G1. I'm assuming it probably is because they have to fill out cards. But I would like to see them, like the wrestlers in the tournament, not be involved in any other matches other than tournament matches. But that was just a little preference of mine. So now let's just jump right to the finals. Overall, I would say the tournament was real enjoyable. And in the finals, this was the only match I watched on with Japanese commentary because I thought it would add to kind of like the feel and atmosphere of it. And I was right. And this finals match just had the feel of a tournament finals match. It felt big, it felt like it was meaningful, and it was cool to see how invested the crowd was into the finals. And I think that says something with having like two Japanese wrestlers. I know Zack Sabre Jr. has won this tournament before. I don't know if the crowd was like as behind him as they would have been with like Japanese wrestlers, so I completely understand that. And again, the feel and atmosphere of it between the presentation, between the commentary, the crowd, the wrestlers in the ring, the people surrounding the ring, it felt real big. It felt real important. And I don't think you get that in tournaments in AEW or in like the King of the Ring tournament. So this felt like a real important match. And it was an outstanding wrestling match. I'll certainly watch it again. And it really got me interested in Oiwa. I want to see him win because he won this G1 Climax, obviously. I want to see him get that championship, and I want to follow the rest of his career. But this was a great match between the two of them, and Oiwa really stood out, and he looks to be, from someone who doesn't watch New Japan regularly, he looks to be like, this is the next guy, and maybe gonna take Okada's place of being like that guy who carries the company for a real long time because he's young, he's great shape, he's good in the ring, and it feels like he has the people behind him. So he has me behind him. I know that for sure. So I want to see that. Overall, really enjoyed the tournament. For the most part, there was a lot of great wrestling. It had the feel of something special. It felt like an important tournament. I'll definitely check out the G1 Climax going forward, and I'll definitely check out Wrestle Kingdom this year, and hopefully Oiwa gets that championship because I'm all in on him, and I'm all in on Boltin Oleg. He stole the tournament for me. I absolutely love him, and he's one of my most must-watch wrestlers, like I said earlier, in pro wrestling today. So Boltin Oleg, you're the man. Oiwa, get the championship. But yeah, great tournament. I enjoyed it, and I'll watch again next year. I'm interested in New Japan more going forward. And yeah, let me know what you thought of the tournament, who stood out for you, what was your favorite match, just your overall thoughts, and I will see you in the next one.